Thank you. We are now ready to start, so I will officially open today's meeting at 9:32 a.m. I would like to acknowledge we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia. Pay respects to elders past and present and the ongoing connection between people, water, lands and community. Today's meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders 2024 under the Planning and Development DAP Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website in accordance with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development DAP Regulations 2011. And panel members, you can refer to your technical devices throughout the meeting to assist you in considering the information in front of you. Today's meeting, we have a full complement of our panel. Online, we welcome Councillor Matthew Rouse. Welcome to the meeting. Councillor Ivy Penny. In the room, we have furthest to my left, we have Heidi Hergert, our specialist member. To my immediate left, I have Clayton Hine, the Deputy Presiding Member, and my name is Francesca Lafanti, Presiding Member. We have two apologies for today's meeting. Councillors from the City of Kwinana, that is Councillor Barry Winmar and Councillor Sherilyn Wood. We also have a member on leave of absence, and that is listed in our agenda. Minutes for this meeting, as is with other meetings, will be available on the DAP website. We are also joined today from officers from the City of Kwinana, and if I can say that correctly, is it Asher Logan and Brett Cavill, did you say, Brett? Thank you. And is it Sarah Sylvester as well? Thank you. Members, can I have a show of hands that you have duly considered all matters before you in relation to this meeting? And that includes the R13 direction response, which was published on the 30th of May, as well as additional material which was published on the 3rd of June. That is unanimous for the minute taker. Members, are there any disclosures of interest? I will first go to members, councillors online and just ask, was this matter considered by a council meeting at all?
No, this hasn't come to council, so no disclosure of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Ivy Penny, are there any disclosures of interest that you have in relation to this?
No.
Thank you. Members, do you have any disclosures in relation to this item? There are nil disclosures for the minute taker. We will now move forward to our item on today's meeting. It is item 3.1, lot 814 Charing Cross, Wellard. It's a childcare centre. We do have one presenter, Mr. Carlo Famiano. He is here in the room with us and will present. As you are aware, Carlo, you've been to many of these before, the DAP Standing Orders 2024, Clause 482, limits presentations to 3 minutes. We have been provided with your material and we have read through that material, and I encourage you to focus on the main aspects that you wish for that meeting. Once you've completed it, we'll have an opportunity for questions from panel members. Following Carlo's presentation and questions from panel members, we will move to officers from the City of Kwinana to make some comments before moving to questions from those officers. Once we move into the subject matter and the debate on the item, it'll only be obviously the panel members that will be discussing it. I'll hand over to yourself, Carlo, for your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present this morning. I'm representing the client for the proposed childcare centre on the subject land. The childcare centre proposes 92 places for children. The site is located surrounded by residential and within the Wellard Activity Centre and Wellard Structure Plan area. The uses along the site, there's a fair few vacant sites, but there is already a childcare centre along this road, as well as a train station adjacent. The site is within the neighbourhood centre R80 area of the structure plan. The use of a childcare centre on this site is permitted. The process that we've gone through with this has been fairly good relationship with the city and very helpful. The city have been helpful throughout the process. We've noted that it was referred to DRP, addressed a number of issues raised by the DRP, as well as a few issues raised by the city's technical officers in regards to waste management, setbacks, turning, and some of the levels on site. So all of those things were changed and amended to address those concerns. We note that it went to public advertising within the area, and there was no comment received, which is good. So we didn't have to worry about going through any objections or submissions. In regards to the recommendation for approval, we certainly welcome that officer level recommendation and the conditions that have been imposed. We do request that 2 conditions be reworded, and that's condition number 7 and condition number 10C. We have consulted with the city throughout the process, and the wording is reflects our discussions with the city. So in regards to condition number 7, and I'll give you just a brief overview of why we're wanting the conditions changed. The condition number 7, we're requesting that the notification be placed prior to occupation of the building or development. The previous wording or the current wording in the report suggests it needs to be prior to building licence stage. Unfortunately, Landgate takes a fair bit of time to get these things on titles, and that will just hold up the development. So prior to occupation, no issues with that. As I said, we discussed that with the city. 10C relates to an acoustics wall that was identified by our acoustics consultant, and it was in relation to a development that is proposed on adjoining lot 813, which is a multiple dwelling development, and there was a window to an apartment facing the childcare centre site. The acoustics wall was recommended to buffer some of the noise that potentially impact that unit. Don't have an issue with constructing the acoustics wall. The only concern we have, and the reason for the rewording, and I've sent through that rewording through to the panel, is so that at the moment that multiple dwelling development is not approved. We don't know if it's going to be approved in that format. They could change their design, the window could change location, and we may not need the acoustics wall. So happy to build the acoustics wall, not a problem. The only thing we're worried about is that building, the final configuration of that building, and whether or not the acoustics wall is still required. So the rewording of that condition 10C is based on the issuance of the building permit for the development at 813, and revisiting the plans and providing a revised acoustics report if that acoustics wall is required. Once again, we've discussed this with the city, and it was the city's wording that you'll see in front of you, so that was recommended by the city. We do know that there was an alternative motion for refusal for this development that came through yesterday afternoon. We have gone through that, and certainly I'm not supportive of the recommendation for refusal. We just want to go back and look at the fact that we have gone through a process with the planning department which is supported. We've gone through the DRP process, and the DRP actually said that this development, or stated that this development is appropriate in its scale, being single story, and appropriate in its location. So we've obviously taken that on board and accepted the DRP's position on it. There is already a single-storey development along Charing Cross, which is opposite, diagonally opposite, next to the train station on a corner block. So the city has in the past approved single-storey developments and a childcare centre along this street. We've looked at the page 43 within the structure plan and the attached figure 17. Going through what is outlined in page 43 and in the structure plan, it sort of appears to focus more on the land that's on the northwest side of the train station, which is where the intensity of development is being focused, being the main core area of the activity centre where the shops are, and all the main streets. When you look at figure 17, and I've actually printed out figure 17, it shows that the area northwest of the train station is the intense area. The area to the southeast is residential, and it actually states within 17 encouraging residential development that focuses towards the train station. The childcare centre does have good connectivity with the street. It provides windows to the staff room towards the street, classrooms towards the street, and the child play area towards the street. We tend to put in, I've done a few childcare centres in the past, we tend to put childcare play areas facing streets because it actually gives a little bit of interaction for the kids. They sort of see what's happening in the outside world and go, wow. And it provides them with a little bit more interaction. So that's hence why we've done the development the way it is. So when it comes to whether or not we've got good interaction and connectivity and passive surveillance of the street, I think we've met that. In regards to the laneway, we did do a traffic report, and I believe the alternative recommendation for refusal outlines that the laneway is not capable of taking the additional traffic. Looking at the traffic report prepared by our consultant, and obviously went through the city's traffic consultants, was certainly supported by the city. Our traffic consultant has identified the fact that main roads identifies these laneways as having 3,000 vehicles per day. I know Liverpool Neighbourhood says 300, but at the end of the day, we're only dealing with a period in the morning and in the afternoon. During the rest of the day, we've got very low vehicle movements. And it's sort of a bit contradicting if we're looking at wanting to intensify uses on this land. Well, you're not going to get a crossover onto Charing Road, there's on-street parking. So whatever development, if the alternative recommendation is pointing towards a more intense type development being, I don't know, shops or offices or some other entertainment type uses, they're going to produce a lot more traffic and they're going to rely on those rights of ways. So I don't believe that the comment about the right of way not being capable of taking traffic is warranted. I think it is, and the traffic report deals with that as well as the city's engineers. So to conclude, I think the proposed development will provide a valuable community service to not only residents in the area, because behind this property is all single-storey residential properties, but will also provide a service to the employees within the activity centre and those residents within the area which use the train station to get to places like the Perth CBD. They can drop off their kids, go to work, come back, pick them up and go home. So it certainly is a use that will service the community well. So to conclude, I take on board the comments made in the alternative recommendation. However, I believe this should be approved and we hope that the panel sees the same.
Thank you for your presentation. Panel members, do you have any questions to this presenter? Yes, Heidi.
I've got a few questions about transport and and waste generally.
No problem.
Okay. In the RER, one of the issues that was discussed was pedestrian access to the development. Now, it's situated, I guess basically it's got three frontage. But the primary frontage is Charing Cross, but the access is actually onto Hopton Lane. And there's no footpath or proposed footpath to be constructed along Hopton Lane. And one of the statements in the transport impact assessment made by the consultants indicates that in the context of parking supply, but that there's very likely to be some draw from pedestrians dropping their children off and collecting their children on foot rather than actually driving and using the parking on site. How is the development going to ensure safety along Hopton in the absence of a footpath on it? And in the context particularly seeing that the estimated total traffic to be using that section of road is in excess of the 300 vehicles per day?
Yeah, the original plan that we had didn't have that connection through to Charing. So the revised plan, and that resulted from discussions with the city and the DRP, was to provide a path that goes from Charing. So let's hold up the plan here. As you can see here, you've got the pathway that goes to that's the main network along Charing. So we've actually put a pathway that connects through to Charing that will allow for pedestrian access. And we've allowed for pedestrian access from the car parking area. The reason why we've kept the entry where it is to try and sort of allow parents that are bringing children and parking their cars to easily access into the building instead of going all the way around. at the same time trying to capture those pedestrians that are coming from Charing. So we know that Hopton doesn't have a laneway, but we're providing one internally within our boundaries to get the pedestrian access.
Okay, so just to confirm, if people are actually walking from the catchment to the southeast and to the immediate south, which is typically generally residential, they're coming up along this kind of a spaghetti network of sort of permeable grid offset intersections. They're not coming across like from the general direction of where the primary footpath and cycling network is.
You're referring to the residential catchment that's to the southeast,
Say they're walking, they drop their child off, and then they're walking to the train, which is
it's sort of difficult to try and get a pathway down to the southeast. Obviously, we can't govern what's happening in the laneway, and we can't govern what's happening in those residential lots to the southeast. We can only really deal with what we've got on our site, and we figured that when we did our work, a lot of the residential catchment would probably people going to the train station and coming over. So we've dealt with that, and the major pedestrian network. Don't have an issue if we have to put an extra pedestrian path to the corner. However, we can't deal with pedestrians further southeast within the laneway. That's out of our control. Obviously, people that do live to the southeast are walking down through that area to get to the train station. I'm assuming they are. So there more than likely is some pedestrian activity occurring. We've and the city have requested that we put speed humps within in the laneway to calm traffic, which we're happy to do. So that would hopefully reduce any vehicle speeds going through laneways. Those people that are trying to take shortcuts through laneways to get to the train station. But in short, we've tried to deal with pedestrian access as good as we can within our site. Obviously, areas outside of us is out of our control.
Because following on from that, the transport and presumably the waste assessment as well, because waste collection is to take place along, is it Rame Lane?
Yep.
Okay. I noticed that the built form on the southwest corner of Rame Lane and Hopton Lane is actually zero lot line. It's right on the corner without a truncation. So when you're traveling northeast, the sight lines are obstructed to the right. Is there a proposal to put a convex mirror in there to make sure that it's safe for vehicles to turn without coming into conflict with vehicles and, more importantly, pedestrians walking up Hopton Lane?
Just in regards to the waste management, originally we had an on-site collection proposed. The city didn't like that, and they actually advised us to collect from the lane. So that was a direction from the city. So we had to swap everything around to make sure that the collection was from the laneway, as opposed to our original submission to collect on site. In regards to the convex mirror, don't have an issue that needs to be put in place. The city hasn't requested one from us, and their engineers haven't requested one. But if it needs to be one, they don't have an issue with it. We've done those in the past in city centre type developments. We've put mirrors in to look at oncoming traffic and pedestrians. But yeah, if that was requested during the assessment phase with the city's engineers, we would have put it in there, no problem.
Okay, so the sightline assessment wasn't done for that particular corner?
By us or the city?
Oh, by obviously the applicant, so your consultant.
Yeah. I don't think, from memory, I don't think it was done. However, the city has gone through and assessed it, and I'm assuming that the city would have looked at sight lines, they usually do. And they haven't come back with any other issues. They came back with a few other engineering matters, which we did address. They didn't come back with a sight line issue.
Okay. More. Now, due to the location of the proposal right across from the primary transport car park, just community park, and you have to pay $2 to park there, etc. Was there an assessment done? Now, I appreciate that the peak hourly traffic is less than 100 vehicles per hour, so that doesn't trigger a higher order of assessment under the WA Transport Impact Assessment Guidelines. But in terms of just coincident traffic, so the morning peak at the train station versus the morning peak at the childcare centre, was there an assessment done to see if there would be any conflict entering and exiting lane?
I know the traffic engineers looked at traffic movements throughout the area, whether or not they specifically targeted the peak periods at the train station, the peak periods of that. I can't answer that at this point. But once again, the traffic report was sent through to the city, and you would assume the city's engineers would have assessed issues such as that. Charing Cross is a fairly wide road reserve. At the moment, doesn't have a great deal of traffic movement. That may or may not change in the future, given the fact that the number of lots along here are still vacant. I would assume that the level of traffic that we're generating is quite minor and impact the train station and Charing Cross. The traffic report did go through the fact that how many vehicles would actually come out onto Charing, because obviously there's another way out, there's two other ways out, and traffic movements can be spread for those different roads. So they're not all coming from one entry exit point.
So no specific assessment in the context of
As far as I'm aware, in relation to the activities of the train station, if you're looking at how the train station works and operates, I'm not sure if they actually looked at that and whether or not they documented that, but they certainly documented the number of traffic movements that we pull out onto Charing and then the disbursement through other exit access means. So not all the traffic is coming out in the one direction.
Okay. Last question on traffic and transport. Now, the location of this particular proposal, it's got proposed 22 bays on the site, right across from a train station and on-street parking. I know the area well, and just based on Google Street View as well, it's quite busy because a lot of people are parking there and getting on the train. Are there any controls proposed for the site to ensure that you don't, like for example, a parent parks, drops a child off, and then walks over the road and gets on the train?
There's signage provided on site, and obviously there's staff on site that will monitor that. And yes, I do take your point. At the moment, there's a lot of people parking on the site, and I think they're trying to avoid paying in the car.
Oh yeah, I'm not even talking on the site.
So,
I'm just talking generally.
Yeah.
It's my experience
Yeah.
that around the peak time when childcare centres tend to peak for that morning peak time, it's usually past the time where the parking is oversubscribed, say at an adjacent railway station,
Yeah,
and then
correct.
the parking just spills
And
everywhere.
people will park anywhere they can possibly park.
So there's a proposal to put signage of some
Look,
sort of
there would be.
parking management?
Yeah, at the end of the day, and I'll get onto the management in a minute, at the end of the day, the childcare centre relies on its own functioning. So it needs its own staff parking, and it needs to make sure it's got its pickup for its own parents for children. So it will be signed, and you've also got a site manager that operates the childcare centre to ensure that we don't have, I guess, foreign parking occurring. There will be the staff bays, they tend to be marked on site, so they are only allocated to staff, and then you've only got your pickup sites. These childcare centres, and in the past, from my experience, they all prepare a management plan on how they operate and manage the childcare centres. And parking is one of those things. So when they look at parking, they look at which one's allocated to the staff, which ones are allocated to pick up to allow parents to get in and out easily. Sometimes we have to mark out certain bays that are not staffed so we can get on-site waste trucks to turn, which we don't need to do in this case. Originally we did have that. And also we need to ensure that those bays are free during those peak periods. So the management plan does get done by the operator of the childcare centre. So by all means, if someone's illegally parking within the centre, then the manager of the centre will need to deal with it.
Just the last quick traffic question. Now, the waste trucks, I know that in the waste plan it's indicated to be line haul and forward gear on street. I'll do with that in a sec. But how are the service deliveries going, service vehicles and deliveries going to be accommodated? Like, say, Coles truck or Woolies truck delivering food or supplies?
Yeah, this is a common question that we get with childcare centres. We don't have, these childcare centres don't rely on large deliveries like a deli or a shop which has a large truck. We tend to, either the operator collects supplies or the Coles truck, which is a standard vehicle size. They're the shorter trucks. They can attend the site and they can park within the car parking area during non-peak periods. So deliveries in the past, from my experience with the childcare centres, is that the deliveries tend to occur during the non-peak period when parents are dropping and picking up kids. So then you have a large number of bays which are free for those trucks to pull in, unload and out. Once again, they're not big trucks, they're small, and they're only delivery vans in most cases.
Okay, but if a 6.5 metre post truck, which is the standard delivery truck for poles, needs to enter the site, is it going to do so? Will it park on the street?
No, they enter the site because they'll enter. Once again, we allocate bays for staff, which are the permanent cars that are parked. Then we make sure that the parent pickup ones are all clumped together, and those trucks can, and during the non-peak periods, those bays are empty. Parents aren't on site. So the truck can pull in and actually use those areas to pull out. And that's how we've run the childcare centres in the past. So it all comes down to allocating those bays and making sure that those bays are set aside, A, for staff and B, for pickups.
Last one, just quickly, waste management plan. So line haul collection, is a bin pad going to be on the northwest side of Rami Lane?
No, they're not putting bin pads, so they come straight, they actually go in, grab the bin and bring it out to the truck as per the direction that was given to us.
But there's no crossover there, so they're going to be crossing the...
No, they stay idled within the lane, and there's a gate next to the bin store where the truck will pull up.
Rami.
So, and that was a solution that was provided to us by the city. So by all means, we've just basically implemented what the city's waste management wanted us to do. Like I said before, originally it was an on-site pickup, so the truck would have come out on site, unloaded or loaded up, so even did the bins, and would have gone out in forward gear. The city wasn't happy with that arrangement. So their suggestion was to do, recommendation was to do it from the laneway as shown, and that gate, basically the truck will park outside that gate, they grab the bin, empty it, put it back in, and then the next one. And that's how it's being dealt with as per the instructions given by the city.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? I'll just go to councillors online. Councillor Matthew Rouse, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Councillor Ivy Penny, do you have any questions to the applicant?
No, thank you.
Any questions for you?
I do. Carlo, in condition 9, there's a reference to table 10 of the traffic impact statement, and that's saying that the centre must operate in accordance with the staff schedule. Is that staff schedule going to be exactly that for the entire duration of this proposal? Or could it change?
Well, from my understanding, when I speak to the operators, that they set their schedule and they stick with it.
But it could change with staffing changes or...
Oh, look, I can't say that.
No,
why,
so
but generally speaking, they tend to run their schedule as is, so that the
condition as it is locks you into that schedule.
Yeah. So if I guess at the end of the day, to get rid of any confusion in the future, we could reword that condition, not a problem.
Okay.
But yeah, we do provide staff schedules and they tend to stick with it.
With condition 10, prior to, in the first part of the condition, it says, shall be at all times, including but not limited to. So what else do you think could be in that list? You happy to have it loose like that?
Didn't really see an issue into it with having that wording in 10.
I'll ask the officers that too, because when I read the acoustic report, the list from A to E were the only ones that the acoustic consultant seemed to reference. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure else what was meant to be there.
No, so I didn't see an issue with the wording of the condition other than 10C. I guess we can ask the staff whether or not there is an issue with that ongoing and whether or not there's a policing issue later on or an issue with any unauthorised or non-compliance with that condition, something could emerge.
Okay, if we move to 10C, if we look at your wording, which is to be constructed prior to the occupation.
Is that 10C? C.
You suggest to reword it, modelling, to be constructed prior to the occupation.
Yeah.
What would you put there in the meantime?
Well, the acoustics wall would just be a normal fence that we put on childcare centres. In the acoustics report, the fence was quite a decent structure. We have built them in the past for other childcare centres. So in the meantime, we'll just have the normal fence that we provide on childcare centres, usually either a 2.1 metre high dividing fence or a 1.8 high dividing fence, until such time as we need to build that fence. And then obviously that fence comes out and the new one comes in. So in the interim, just a normal fence.
Okay.
Can I just have, following on that specific question, typically we don't see in conditions links to a development that's not part of the subject site, and there are no controls that we are dealing with today in relation to that adjoining site. I suppose I'd like some further information about certainty around that, and this concept that I'm hearing in the discussion today is it will be done at a time based on the design of the development next door. So to me that's a very uncertain planning condition relating to this development. The information that we've got in the material from yourself is that there's a development going on of some nature which is residential, and typically with childcare, residential development requires a level of consideration for noise. So what do you say in relation to a specific obligation? It seems to me of concern that you would put a regular fence in with an opportunity to remove and replace it later. Why would...
I understand your point. The issue I guess we've got here is that if that development next door was approved, we have no issue at all and we'll just build the fence, the acoustics wall. The problem we have is we don't know if that development, A, is going to be developed, B, is it going to be in that design format, and if it is not in that design format, we don't need to have an acoustics wall of that nature on that site. Normally it will just be a 2.1 metre high masonry fence when we're abutting a residential property. So I guess the concern is we don't know, we haven't got any certainty of what's being built next door. So, and I guess talking to the client, we're in a situation where, yeah, we can build this up front, but if it's not required, then we've wasted money and time building it. And it's just going to sit there with no real purpose. So, like I said, the client doesn't have an issue with building the acoustics wall in that manner. They have done it in the past. We've done it in the past with other developments. So there's not an issue with it. The issue we have is we don't know what's happening next door. There's no certainty with next door. And at the moment, we're only being dictated by a proposal that may or may not be built and may or may not be built in that format. So I guess the question is, how do we deal with that? Do we, at the end of the day, like I said, we can build it, not a problem, but it might not be needed. So happy to build it. We can put in another mechanism that ensures that the client constructs it. I guess at the end of the day, if it's a condition and they fail to construct it prior to the occupation of the property next door, they fall foul of that condition and then they can be served notice and prosecuted and whatever else. I'm assuming that's the mechanism that would be used if we fail to do it.
I'll have some questions to the city because there is some questions around certainty, clarity and certainty for this, obligations of the legislation and obligations on this development to ensure it does not create an impact on any of those developments relative to the legislation. So we'll have a question to the city on that. My second question is in relation to your design. I note we received additional material. I'm looking at your design that is elevations. It's electronic page 21. I think that the elevations in front of you. It is the western elevation, the Charing Cross elevation. And I'm looking at that and cross-referencing it to the floor plan. I suppose from my perspective it is directly opposite the railway station, obviously the car park, the substantial car park of the station. But that elevation, to me, can you speak to streetscape interaction? Because it looks like there's a fence and a roof. And according to landscape plans, you're going to have landscaping around the boundary. Can you speak to the streetscape of this proposal on Charing? That's the first part of my question. And the second part of my question, which speaks to exactly the same plan, is that this plan does not include any connection, pedestrian or otherwise, or a door connection to Charing Cross, which is obviously quite a central element in terms of both the centre area as well as directly opposite it. And I note that there's a door, but it goes to a laundry. This appears to completely turn its back on Charing Cross on that design. Can you explain why, given the significance of Charing Cross, and like most, I've been out and had a look at the site, and that is the road that you drive on. Those little laneways are not the predominant lane. Unless you live in those, the predominant movement is on Charing Cross.
Yeah, we did look at that, and speaking to the designer in regards to how we configured that, that door to the laundry is screened by a screen wall, which will have a sign for the childcare centre on the side, won't be visible from Charing. We do have a pedestrian link that's along the laneway, so we did look at having a pedestrian link and trying to get a link to Charing, and that's why we put that pedestrian. As I mentioned before, the reason why we did that was we're trying to capture the parents that are using the car park as well as those using the footpath along Charing. We didn't want to put the opening or the main entry onto Charing, because then the parents would have to walk all the way around with their children, and A, makes it a longer walk for them, 2, gets a bit congested because they have to walk all the way around to Charing to get to the car park. So that is how we sort of address that connectivity with Charing, is through that pedestrian path to the main entry. In regards
my
to...
bigger concern is not so much the pedestrian path, you did explain.
Yep.
The plans that I've got in front of me, essentially, so a fence, open fence, and a roof as your street interface. Some of the other development in the area has 2-storey on it, or a upper level that, not necessarily on this side, but on the other side of where the other commercial is. So I suppose what I'm interested in finding out is, why is this an appropriate design facing onto Charing Cross as a design interface in that particular location? Yeah,
no problem. Elevations always seem to be very difficult, they're 2-dimensional, so there is a fairly decent setback between that fence or Charing's boundary and the actual roof. So there is a gap between the front boundary to Charing and the actual building itself, so that roof isn't sitting directly on Charing, it's sitting further back. The main aim was to try and get those play areas along the street to get that connectivity for children, and we do that a fair bit with childcare centres to try and get that interaction, and that's what we were trying to get with the location of the play area on this site here in particular. I do take the point that, we are on, Charing is the main drive, but unfortunately opposite this site is just one ginormous car park with cars. It doesn't, over the road, doesn't provide any decent built form character onto this street whatsoever. And further down, you've got another childcare centre which has its car park on a Charing and faces another alternative street. So when you're looking at developments that have occurred down Charing, they haven't treated Charing as a primary road to get that connectivity. We've sort of looked at it the other way, and we've looked at how we can deal with getting our parents in and out of the building, but at the same time we've provided some connectivity and connection with the street by putting the child play area there and the windows to all of those internal areas facing the street. So unlike those other developments that I've mentioned, they produce no connectivity with the street. We're actually producing some connectivity with the street, and a fair bit, to be quite honest, because the kids will actually be out there and playing and interacting and seeing what's on the outside world. So that's the approach we've taken. Obviously, if this was a shopping centre, it would have all its windows and everything onto the street. But it's not a shopping centre, it's a childcare centre. The main people or the main product of the childcare centre is children, and the children, we're trying to give them that connectivity with the street. Instead of locking them up in the back of the property, surrounded by fencing, we're trying to put them at the front and see the world. And that's how we've dealt with childcare centres.
Thank you. They were my questions. Any further questions? If not, we'll thank you for your presentation and your questions, and we will move to city officers. You are visual on the screen. City officers, if you would like to make comments about the proposal or any comments in relation to what you've heard today, and then we will go to questions from panel members. Over to yourself.
Thank you, Chair. Look, we don't really have any comments further to make. We don't have a presentation or anything to make. We're just happy to answer questions and go from there.
Thank you. Panel members, do you have questions to city officers?
I do.
Over to yourself, Heidi.
I've got a couple. Just following on from my inquiry to the applicant's representative, did the city, in terms of their assessment of the traffic along Charing Cross and on Hopton Lane, did they consider the coincident impacts between the demand for the train station parking during peak hours and the childcare centre across that section of road?
I think we understand that the site's vacant now, and there's lots of vacant sites across there that have been used for informal parking, and we understand that when this site is developed in whatever form, or when the other sites are also developed, we understand that that is going to displace that parking, and that the city will be dealing with the lack of parking there and how we deal with that. But in terms of specifics, things like have we considered timed parking or anything like that? No, I think at this point we're aware that these sites will be developed and it will displace that train station parking, and that will be a separate issue for the city to resolve and deal with.
Okay, that wasn't my question wasn't about the parking, it was about the coincident traffic demands across Charing Cross between the train station entering and exiting during the peak hours and the childcare entering and exiting opposite the train station site.
Okay, sorry, misunderstood your question. We would have assessed it against the traffic impact assessment and the traffic that it's identified as being generated or forecast. So our assessment it would have been limited to the scope of what's in the traffic impact assessment. We don't have data of our own or traffic counts of our own about the current sort of use of Charing Cross. So.
Okay, next question. And this is directed to the city, to your engineers. Are there any plans in place to redesignate the speed zoning in that general Wellard town centre area to 40 k's an hour?
No plans we're aware of?
No, not that we're aware of, no.
Are there, following on from that, are there any pedestrian crossings, formal pedestrian crossings proposed for Charing Cross along that section of road?
No, I think because the development sites have been vacant for, well over a decade, there hasn't been a lot of, I suppose, recent work done there. We've now experienced just in the last 6 months, just about all those vacant sites on the southern side of the train station have got an active development application, either under assessment or has been approved already. So clearly there's going to be an impact on the sort of informal use of those sites for parking. We'll have to look at the sort of traffic flows around that area, and consider, any traffic calming measures or timed parking on the streets and that sort of thing. But like I said, up until now, there's been no indication that this area is going to be sort of developed, that there's been interest to develop. Now that is there, and it looks as though some of the developments will go ahead, the city will certainly do some work around this area.
Any further questions, Heidi?
No.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Clayton?
Just one. In relation to condition 10, I did ask the applicants this, but it states that the recommendations contained in the report prepared by Herring Storer, acoustics, must be implemented at all times, including but not limited to. But when I read the Herring Storer report, A to E were the recommendations contained in that, and I couldn't see anything else. So I'm not sure what not limited to means.
It may actually be revised if the development adjacent changes. So it may allow for a revision of that acoustic report.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. So it is a bit of a catch-all statement to cover anything that is not that is in the noise assessment, but is not explicitly a recommendation. So, as an example, the modelling is based on a certain mix of children and children's ages. So that produces the noise levels and the mitigation measures. So it's like I said, it's a bit of a catch-all that's trying to ensure that the noise assessment as a whole is implemented, including that it's operated in accordance with the assumed modelling. So I concede that it's not a recommendation, and it is a bit of a sort of safety. It gives that bit of flexibility to ensure that any aspect of the noise assessment is implemented. That's effectively what it's there for.
It doesn't mean you could add point F at some point in the future.
No, that's right. It's meaning whatever is in the noise assessment as referenced in that condition, and then it then lists some specific things just to try to bring attention to those as the key recommendations. But it doesn't mean anything. We're not expecting other measures necessarily. It's really just trying to capture that the noise assessment is implemented based on, or it's operated in accordance with the assumptions and any other aspects of the noise assessment.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question, sorry.
No.
I've got a follow-up question, similar to the question I asked the applicant in relation to condition 10C. My concerns, and I'd be interested in your comment, I've got a couple of questions to it. We don't typically see planning conditions, or typically planning conditions are certain and final, and they don't typically align or relate to an undefined application or proposal on a neighbouring site, which is not the subject of this development. Can you speak to condition 10C, its wording? And in that context, I suppose my second part of that question is language of condition 10C. Is it more appropriate that as an obligation for the applicant that they are required to provide acoustic fencing on the boundary to comply with relating to the building occupation as well as the play areas in compliance with the provisions, the noise provisions? And I suppose what I'm trying to get at, and you can think of better language if you wish, is that the obligation is on the applicant to provide acoustic fencing regardless of the neighbouring site relative to the obligations of the legislation. Can you speak to condition 10C in those two parts to my question?
Yeah, sure. So the adjoining site, we do have a development application on that site, which is likely to be approved this week for a 3-storey multiple dwellings, so residential use, so clearly a sensitive use that is afforded some protection under the environmental noise regulations. But as you've correctly pointed out, the development's not there, so it's arguable that, you know, is there a sensitive use on that site now, which I tend to agree it does lead to. Look, during the assessment, that application was pointed out to the proponent, and they were, you know, more than willing, I suppose, to accommodate in their noise assessment the likelihood that that site will be used for sensitive use, and their noise consultant assessed that and determined that some sort of acoustic fencing is required. But having said that, I certainly take your point that there is uncertainty that sensitive use is not there on the site right now. And my understanding of the noise regulations are if this use was approved and is operating and they generate noise that is outside or beyond the environmental noise regulations, which then impacts on that sensitive use, there would be a requirement for them to address that in any case. So we would be comfortable with some amended wording around that point C to provide a bit more certainty to the applicant and all those concerned around when that fencing is required. Haven't really thought of some alternative wording off the top of my head, but I think we could do that as the discussion progresses, if you'd like.
Yes, that would be good. The language that I noted down for myself was the provision of an acoustic boundary fence to be provided to ensure the development, including play area, is in compliance with the noise regulations. It's very loose, but you can think of better language. That's my first question. My second question is a similar question about the streetscape, but in the context of planning context. I note we've got a zoning over the site. There is a structure plan and a series of other documents related to the site. But I'm interested in the local context. Having been to the site, it is opposite, this section of the area is quite different from the other section on the other side of the railway line. I note that the development plans, or the structure plan, includes what is now fully residential development as being part of the neighbourhood centre. So what do you say the local context of this site is relative to the structure plan and your active development applications along these vacant sites? It seems quite different from what the structure plan was envisaging. And my question then is the context of this proposal in that local context, the appropriateness of this proposal in that local context.
Sure. Well, clearly these sites haven't developed. I understand they haven't really been marketed by the Landowner Development WA for many years, but they have now. And from what the sites immediately to it would be southwest, northeast, and then further up Charing Cross. All those sites, we have applications for 3-storey multiple dwelling use. So those sites, I suppose, are it's that more intense residential use and a transition of built form from, if you looked at the Wellard Station as maybe the centre, or even the shopping centre to the north side as your core of the neighbourhood centre. You'd expect the higher, taller buildings there. I should also point out the council just last week approved an 8-storey building on the north side of the railway line for which is a mixed-use development, 40 multiple dwellings and some commercial activity on the ground floor level. So I suppose the intended character, from what we understand it, for the south side of the railway line is more intense residential uses. The structure plan does talk about some sort of entertainment or commercial uses as well. But we're probably the primary thing that we'd be looking at is that transition of built form from the higher buildings in the core of the neighbourhood centre, stepping down to say the 3 to 4 stories along this frontage of Charing Cross, and then further in into the neighbourhood of just predominantly single-storey houses.
Thank you.
Sort of answer your question?
Yes, it does. So in that context where you're talking about predominantly residential along that section of Charing, but of greater height, how do you see the height and street interaction of this development, which is a single level building, in the context of what you've just said?
Yeah, sure. The use itself, as the report highlights, is a P use, a permitted use. So there's no, I suppose, question or debate around that. As you correctly sort of indicated, the built forming kind of becomes the issue. Our assessment has determined that, with a sort of street level activation, the building sort of coming to the corner of Charing Cross and Hopton Lane, that is acceptable. Look, there's it could be an argument, and like I think there would be a preferred position that we would want a taller building, but the planning framework, the structure plan doesn't speak to minimum heights. There's no requirements in there. It certainly indicates a more intense sort of development in this area, but from a statutory sort of point of view, it's not particularly strong in that sense. So that's I suppose informed where we've got to with the report, the assessment, and our recommendation.
Thank you for that. Those are my questions. And my last question is, sorry, I do have one last question. My last question is in relation to condition 1. Do you have, yes, you know there's been some legislative changes. We don't require this provision. Do you have any issues, or is there any particular reasons why you have it in there? Or would you have any issues with us removing it?
Yeah, I think originally it was because it's within 100 metres of the railway reserve, which is the trigger for approval under the Metropolitan Region Scheme. In this case, that's our understanding of that. It does require approval under the Metropolitan Region Scheme for that reason.
Thank you for that. Any further questions, panel members? Thank you, officers. We'll now move back to the item. The item has a recommendation at the beginning of the item. There is an alternative recommendation that's been provided for refusal. In accordance with the DAP provisions, we will first move to the recommendation as written at the beginning of the report. Is there a mover of the RA recommendation? It is moved, Clayton Heim. Is there a seconder of the RA recommendation? I will second the recommendation. Would you like to speak to the item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I sense the reluctance to support it or readily support it is largely because it may appear to not be the best development for this location. I accept childcare centre is probably, it's a good use in this location. I think we're talking about the design and the built form. However, as the officers have pointed out, 3 stories is a limit. It's not a requirement, and it does address the corner of the street, and I think to some extent it does address the activation of the street, albeit probably not as envisaged in the planning excuse me, the planning documents. I think from a traffic point of view, there's a bit of a difficulty in that part of Wellard. From what I understand, it's a bit chaotic there in terms of parking. But that aside, this proposal is providing adequate parking. It's providing adequate access from my point of view, and I can support it on those grounds. I think there are a couple of amendments that I would like to move, Madam Chair. One is in condition 9, is to add the words at the end of the condition, or as amended with the approval of the city.
Okay. So that is or as amended
with the approval
of the or to the satisfaction.
Oh yes, I don't mind.
To the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana.
Yes.
So that is Amendment 1. Is there a seconder? I will second Amendment 1.
And the reason for that is to just provide some flexibility as these things do change over time.
As the seconder, I would concur with your comments. I have nothing further to add to it. Is there any other speakers on Amendment 1?
Oh, no.
Yes. Oh, sorry. If there are no other speakers on Amendment 1, would you like to have right of reply?
No.
We are going to the vote. All those in favour? Again, sorry, I'll do it again. All those in favour? Amendment 1 is carried unanimously. Would you like to continue speaking?
Going back, sorry, I'm going backwards a bit. I'm going to pick up the condition 7 as per the request from the applicant. Let's see if I can find that, sorry. There it is. Instead of prior to the complete building application or permit application, it's prior to occupation of the development.
So prior to occupational development, is there a seconder for Amendment 2? It is seconded. Heidi Herget. Would you like to continue speaking to the...
I think it's pretty
Would you like to speak?
straightforward.
Seconder. Is there any other speakers on Amendment 2? Would you like a right of reply?
No, fine.
We are going to the vote on Amendment 2. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously. Would you like to continue speaking?
Thank you. I don't think I have much further to say other than to I support the proposal. There's obviously, and there probably is a great need for these sort of services in this part of Kwinana, and I encourage fellow members to also support it. And I'll leave the possible changes to other conditions to other people. Thank you.
Thank you. As the seconder of the substantive motion, I will speak to the motion. Initially, like probably many others, there were some interesting thoughts in my head in relation to the proposal and its context. Having read through the documentation provided both in the RA and in all of the supporting documents, including the structure plan, as well as going to site, and thank you to the officers today for providing further clarity on the context of what's also happening in that area, I am comfortable that this proposal on this site, in this location, is an appropriate development. It is permitted use. The structure plan documents are serious, given serious and due regard, but I do note that based on the material of those plans, substantial areas that are included and identified as the neighbourhood centre are currently residential. There are significant tracts of land that are undeveloped in that area, and this site is directly opposite a car park. The times that I was out on site, parking was everywhere. A substantial area taken up with parking, and the car park itself to the railway station is a fairly large car park in terms of its street interaction. I would agree with the applicant's comments that have been provided today that the interface for any development to that car park is different than you might have on the other side of the railway line, where you have a more town centre roadway with direct interaction on the street. So from my perspective, the context of this site coupled with the development provisions over it mean that in this particular case, on this particular location, the development from my perspective is acceptable. The element that has included the fencing, open style fencing, will enable some level of interaction through children play and other movement on the site, which is positive from my perspective, and therefore it is an appropriate development. Issues regarding traffic and movement have been addressed, and I'm satisfied that those matters are appropriate in this context, noting that Charing Cross is already a developed road with dedicated parking, and that opportunity for direct access is not provided for it. At this juncture, I will, however, want to move an amendment. My amendment is to condition 10. It is condition 10C. And I am now going to move fairly quickly to the officers. The language that I wrote down, and let's see if I can find it. I'd like to get some some support from the officers in terms of this language. I will read out what I've got in just crafting this amendment for the minute taker. This is Amendment 3, and it is replacing modifying condition 10C with the words along the lines of, and if you can consider these and advise further, please, officers, the provision of acoustic boundary fencing to be provided on the development, including play areas, to ensure compliance with the noise regulations. That's my language, but if you have got better, more definitive language for that condition, from my perspective, it's to achieve a couple of things. One, be certain and final. Two, relate to this development and not be connected to a yet to be determined development. So the intention is very clearly the applicant is required to provide acoustic boundary fencing to its development, including play areas, in compliance with the noise regulations. I'm not specifically referring to any one development, but they would be obliged to do it. The only thing I haven't said is the timing of it, and it should probably be to be provided. Well, I haven't provided it. Could you provide some comments, please?
Yeah, I guess in terms of timing, prior to occupation of the development would be appropriate. That would ensure that the fencing is up before the land use is actually operating and the noise and generating the noise. And yeah, in terms of the rest of your wording, I think that we're agreeable to that. I don't know if is it necessary to say that the complies with the noise regulations on surrounding land, or just that I guess it complies with the noise regulations means that it doesn't generate it from the development itself. So I think that's fine how you've worded it.
Okay. So for the minute to take, the language is the provision of acoustic boundary fencing to be provided on the development, including play areas, in compliance with the noise regulations, and to be undertaken prior to occupation. Or undertaken prior to occupation. I haven't specifically referred to the neighbouring site, although, as we've already indicated, the obligation is with the applicant regardless of what goes on next door. Is there a seconder? So I've got a very long way to get to. Is there a seconder of this condition? Is seconded. Would you like, Clayton, would you like to speak to it?
No, I agree.
Does anybody else wish to speak to this amendment? Thank you. I've said all I wanted to say in relation to it. I will now go to the vote of Amendment 3, I think it is. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously from me, from the panel. I now move back to the agenda. I have nothing further to say. I've made my comments. Are there any other speakers on the substantive motion? Yes, Heidi.
Look, despite some reservations and some questions that I have in terms of just the general movement network, I do appreciate that. I think the proposal is appropriate for the area. It's in location, crossing to the train station. It's located in a burgeoning urban area. I'm confident that the city's engineering department will continue to look at that area in terms of safety, pedestrians, cyclists, car parking, etc. I believe the car parking proposed is appropriate for the site and will adequately cater to the demands. I think that condition 8 will go a long way once implemented to ensuring that there's enhanced safety and lower speeds on Hopton Lane with the implementation of the speed humps. I would just like to add, I'd like to move 2 conditions or a combined condition. One, I still have concerns about maneuvering out of Rammy Lane onto Hopton because of that blind corner. I'd like to suggest to propose a condition that a sightline assessment be done and the results and whatever results come out of that are implemented prior to occupancy of the development. Whatever measures that might be a convex mirror, etc. But I'm not going to presuppose that. I think that should be done by a qualified traffic engineer or civil engineer. So that's one condition, and the other one is I I'm fully aware of how childcare centres operate, having done many of them myself. I think that the waste movements have been adequately catered to. I'm comfortable with that. I think the majority of the service deliveries will in fact be the B99 or vehicles, typical vehicles or less. However, I believe that there will be some service and delivery vehicles that will be greater than that size, and they need to be catered for or at least addressed in the context how those are going to be accommodated. Time periods, how they're going to be managed to and from the site. It can be either in the context of site management plan. I believe that just in the context of the proposed size of the center and the number of children it's catering to, that potentially a service and delivery management plan is appropriate. And again, condition that to prior to occupancy to address how these vehicles are going to be accommodated either in the road space as it exists, on the site, in the laneway, etc. What time periods will be assigned to these service and deliveries outside the peak demand times. So those are the two conditions that I have.
Okay, what we'll do, if we may, through your comments, I'd like to deal with those conditions as two separate amendments to enable us to duly consider them. This is Amendment 4 for the minute taker. So I'll read the language that I've taken down and can confirm if that is what you're wanting to move, Member Heidi Herget, that a sightline assessment is undertaken and the findings implemented to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana. Do you want to clarify that language?
Yeah, a sightline assessment, the intersection of Rami Lane and Hopton Lane.
Hang a second. Okay, so that's the sightline assessment at the intersection for the intersection of Rami and Hopton Lane be undertaken and the findings implemented to the satisfaction of the city
Prior to occupancy.
prior to occupancy. So the sightline assessment, could I just get clarity about specifically for this development, so the words are that a sightline assessment for the intersection of Rami Lane and Hopkin Lane be undertaken and the findings implemented prior to occupation to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana. Is there enough certainty in what the applicant needs to do in terms of the work, the sightline assessment?
I think maybe potentially a sightline assessment undertaken by a qualified traffic engineer. They'll know what to do.
Okay, before we go to a second, I'll read this out, and if you can again confirm that you are satisfied, that's a new condition. Are you wanting to be added to the condition, or you want a new condition?
The new condition is the service and delivery.
So for
the
this,
loading and service and delivery management plan to be prepared.
No, but for this one, are you saying this is a new condition?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the minute taker, Amendment 4 for all members, this one that we're going to discuss at the moment is that a sightline assessment by a qualified traffic engineer for the intersection of Remy Lane and Hopkin Lane be undertaken and the findings implemented prior to occupancy to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana. Is there a seconder to this amendment? It is seconded, Clayton Hine. Would the mover of Amendment 4 like to speak to it? Would you like to speak to that amendment you're moving?
Look, I think that any issues there that present or concerns that may have been raised, that I may have, I think they can be adequately addressed through a more detailed assessment that hasn't been done to date, that has just been raised in the context of this particular meeting and potentially by the city. I don't know, it's not documented in the RAR. I do believe there are measures that can be put into play to actually enhance the safety of that particular location for all the users, be it the waste management trucks turning out of Rami Lane, any potential conflict between pedestrians going up Hopton Lane in absence of a dedicated pedestrian infrastructure, and vehicles coming out of Rami Lane. I believe that it can be engineered. But I believe an assessment, a further assessment is required.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to Amendment?
Okay.
Are there any further speakers on Amendment 4? I will speak to Amendment 4. I am comfortable that the assessment relates directly to the development and that it deals with safe movement of both people and services to the site relative to the site's local context in terms of the narrowness of the roads surrounding it. Those are my comments. Would you like to have right of reply? We are now going to the vote on Amendment 4. All those in favour? It is carried unanimously for the minute taker. Amendment 5, also from yourself, Heidi, for waste. I've got listed, the language I've got listed when you were speaking is in the new condition for the minute taker that that service and delivery management plans be prepared to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana prior to occupancy. That should be prepared and implemented. Let me just do that. That service management plans be prepared and implemented. And thereafter implemented to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana. So I'll read this out for yourself, Heidi, and also for the minute taker, and for the rest of the members to be clear. What I've written down here is that that service and delivery management plans be prepared prior to occupancy to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana and thereafter implemented. Is that?
It's a single plan, a service or loading service and delivery management plan, singular.
Yep. Loading, service and
delivery management plan.
Okay, yep. Thank you.
Be prepared and submitted to, however you want to word it, to the city, to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana prior to occupancy.
Mm-hmm. Did you want the words "and thereafter maintained"? Yes. Implemented? Okay. Is there a seconder for Amendment 5? I will second Amendment 5. Would you like to speak to Amendment 5?
Look, I honestly believe that the movements to and from the site, clearly in terms of demand for parking, are going to be managed adequately and satisfactorily and safely. But I think the other demands associated with the site outside the peak hours need to be managed safely as well. There's a lot going on in this particular area, and it's only going to get busier. And I appreciate that the intent behind delivery structure plan and then associated urban development is for it to be active and that you have a range of users. And within that range of users, obviously, are sites that may be perceived initially as tight and difficult to navigate for service and delivery movements, but I don't think we can overlook it. And I think there'd be a plan like this goes a long way to giving comfort to obviously to the operator, but to the city as well, who's the infrastructure owner in terms of safety. And just the profile of the users on the sort of lower order road network in that particular area.
Thank you. I have no further comments. You've said all the things I would have said. Is there any other speakers on Amendment 5?
I think just to say, other than to say, this is a pretty standard request anyway, or requirement for a lot of developments these days.
Thank you. If there's no other speakers, would you like a right of reply to your amendment? We are now putting Amendment 5, new condition, to the vote. All those in favour? Is carried unanimously. Would you like to continue speaking? Are there any further speakers on the motion? Yes, we move to Councillor
Rouse.
Yes, Rouse. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, please. As you can tell from my alternative motion, I'm not in support of the recommendation to approve this development. Maybe a moot point now, but I'd just still like to have my say. Wellard Village was always intended to be Perth's premium transit-oriented development. This proposal does nothing to contribute to that, I don't believe. As we heard last week, the council approved an 8-storey mixed-use retail, commercial, residential development on the southern side of the train line, right adjacent to the train station. So this council is pro multi-storey, quality designed and thoughtfully planned high-density mixed-use developments around the station. We're all for that. The structure plan, the structure plan's clear on the intent of the estate, and a childcare centre situated on such a prime location, neighbourhood centre, adjacent to the train station, is probably not in keeping with that intent. And it can be argued, although the proponent doesn't think so, that the figure in the structure plan indicating neighbourhood centre does include the subject site. So the childcare centre does not provide any natural surveillance over the park and ride facilities outside of business hours, evenings and weekends, where most of the surveillance is needed, as per the neighbourhood concept. 665 of the design code state that, I'll read this. Today, good town centres are not necessarily delivered by a hands-off approach or relying on the market to provide the best outcome. The market might be the most efficient means in delivering the use, but in many cases, it has no broader interest in the community or in inspiring other activities to locate nearby. So while a childcare centre may be a permitted use, it won't contribute to the 24-hour character and will not activate or contribute to the locality outside of weekdays. So, and it actually may, in my opinion, dissuade more appropriate developments on adjacent land to invest. The single-storey design, which appears like a big house, a really nice big house, mind you, but it's will be surrounded by some nice gardens and car park, will be probably incompatible, in my opinion, with future character in the site's settings. And although the proponent says otherwise, I don't believe it will interact with Charing Cross. Hopton Lane is inadequate to accommodate access and egress to the site for the development, and the traffic volumes projected from the development will exceed the capacity of the lane. Use of the lane will be unsafe and to the detriment of the surrounding residential uses in the future. So the proponent made one point that parents may drop off children and catch the train to the city. However, as we all know, as we've been to the site, and those that live in this around this area will know that there is an adequate parking to cope at the moment, and the train station is limited with its park and ride facility, and it's not actually intended as a transit-orientated development to take more parking. The vacant blocks, as you've seen, are being used as the car parks, and parking will only be increased by if any parents drop their kids off. Will only be increased and become a problem for the local residents. Also, in response to the Charing Cross is not a very wide road, as stated, or road reserve, and there is significant traffic in the morning and evening peak periods. So I believe this will cause further problems. TODs are intended to decrease the use of cars and not increase them. Wellard Village deserves to see its original vision come to fruition, and we're on the cusp of actually achieving that. As we've heard, there's now developments coming into the city, but if we allow this vision now to become blurred, then we're probably doing a disservice to the Wellard Village people and the businesses that have chosen to invest in them. This is a prime location for multi-storey residential apartments, and that should be what it's used for. So long-term residents and business owners of the village have been let down for years by lack of development, lack of appropriate development. And so I urge you not to let them down again by approving this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Ivy? Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate the comments of Councillor Rouse, that the proposals are underutilisation of the site. It's a good use, but not the best use, and that the traffic concerns are considerable, especially along Charing Cross and access to Hopetoun Lane. The considerations around vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle access are, as has been reflected in the comments and questions of the panel, are only going to get more significant with greater pressures on that area, and that this development, has the capacity to sort of greatly impact local amenity and livability. So hence I won't be supporting this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like right of reply?
Yes, thank you. Look, I acknowledge the councillor's concerns about realising a vision. However, our role here is to deal with this application before us today, which is a permitted use, albeit in a built form that may not be the most desirable built form. I don't think we could refuse it on the grounds that we would like to see something different there, or something that's incorporated with other activities. We can't, we need to deal with what's before us and not what we think we would like there. So, as I've said before, I think this proposal, it works in this location. I think it's acceptable in terms of the built form, and it may be that in the future, when the market changes, then a whole lot of other things might occur on this site. So, Madam Chair, I encourage people to support it with the conditions as amended.
Thank you. Right of reply has been had. We are going to the vote on the substantive inclusive of various amendments. All those in favour? Against? Well, the minute taker is carried 3-2, and you have got the votes for and against the proposal. Thank you for that. We move back to our agenda. There are no Form 2 applications, nor are there any Section 31 SAT reconsiderations. Part C includes various SAT applications that cover this committee. There is only one in Gosnells, and I obviously won't speak to any of them. Accordingly, today's meeting is now closed at 10:59 a.m. I thank everybody for your participation.
Thank you, everyone.
See you.
Thank you.